My name is Leslie, and in this presentation, I will be walking through two major discrimination incidents that occurred within the past 5 years and how they relate to behavioral health. The first incident focuses on the killing of George Floyd, which highlighted long-standing issues of racial discrimination in the United States and led to national conversations about equity, justice, and trauma within marginalized communities. The second incident involves a visually impaired shopper who experienced disability discrimination at a Target store. A case that reminds us that unequal treatment also affects individuals with physical disabilities in everyday settings. My goal here in this presentation is not only to describe what happened in these incidents, but also to look at how events like these influence the behavioral health experiences of people from racial and disability communities. I will also discuss what behavioral health workers can do to avoid discrimination, what ethical and multicultural training should address, and how we can create safer and more supportive environments for all clients. So the first incident that we are going to be talking about in this presentation is the George Floyd incident. The first incident that I chose to talk about is the killing of George Floyd, which happened in 2020. This case is one most of us remember clearly because the video and the public response brought national attention to racial discrimination in a way that could not be ignored. According to the Department of Justice's investigation, the Minneapolis Police Department had a long history of discriminatory practices and excessive force that disproportionately affected Black residents. George Floyd's death became more than just an isolated incident. It truly highlighted how racism can be built into policies, procedures, and everyday interactions. I chose this case because it pushed the entire country to talk honestly about race, discrimination, and power. Many communities of color already knew these issues existed, but this case forced others to finally confront them. It also connects directly to behavioral health because traumatic events like this affect not only the person involved, but entire communities. People experienced grief, anger, fear, and hopelessness. These emotions influenced mental health long after the news coverage ended. When we look at racial discrimination through a behavioral health lens, we can see how important it is for providers to understand historical trauma, community mistrust, and the emotional impact of injustice. After George Floyd's death, there were long-term outcomes that extended far beyond the trial and conviction. The DOJ's investigation found years of discriminatory policing, especially targeting Black residents, according to the Associated Press. This led to mandated reforms to training, use of force policies, and accountability systems. Although change takes time, the case pushed cities across the country to examine their own systems. Mentally and emotionally, this case had a major impact on Black communities. Many people reported increased anxiety, depression, and stress during and after the incident, especially those who had lived experiences with racism. For a lot of people, it brought up memories of discrimination and it made them feel unsafe or unseen. Behavioral health providers began receiving more clients who wanted to talk about racial trauma, community fear, and the grief. This incident reminds us that discrimination does not just affect one moment. It affects how people move through the world, how they trust institutions, and how safe they feel. As a behavioral health worker, we need to keep these long-term impacts in mind so we can meet clients with empathy and awareness. When we look at racial discrimination through a behavioral health lens, we see how deeply it affects mental and emotional well-being. Events like the George Floyd case led to a rise in community trauma, stress, and fear. Many Black clients may come into therapy already carrying experiences of trauma. That means they might have a harder time trusting providers or opening up about their emotions. Research shows that discrimination increases the risk of depression, anxiety, and trauma responses, according to Williams and Muhammad, 2009. For behavioral health professionals, this means our approach has to be sensitive, respectful, and culturally informed. Clients should feel seen, Clients should feel safe to talk about their experiences without worrying that the provider will minimize their pain or avoid the topic. Validating racial experiences is key. It helps clients feel seen and supported. Providers should also understand generational trauma and how discrimination shapes a person's identity, worldview, and coping skills. When counselors take the time to acknowledge all of this, clients are more likely to engage in therapy and feel that the space is genuinely safe. The second incident that we're going to be talking about in this presentation is the Target disability discrimination case. This second incident that we're going to be talking about focuses on disability discrimination. In 2022, a visually impaired woman reported that Target employees refused to assist her at a checkout even after she explained her disability and requested help from them. According to Bloomberg News, the woman stated that staff declined to help her use the touchscreen payment system and left her standing there without support. This situation violated the ADA, which requires companies to provide reasonable accommodations to people with disabilities. This incident stood out to me because it shows how discrimination can happen in everyday moments that many of us truly take for granted. Sometimes, something as simple as checking out at a store can turn into a stressful and disheartening experience. For people with disabilities, moments like these build frustration, mistrust, and fear of not being treated with dignity. I personally chose this case because it highlights how disability discrimination is often overlooked or even ignored. It also reminds us how important accessibility and awareness are. Many people just assume discrimination only happens through hateful or aggressive actions, but sometimes it happens through neglect, lack of training, or not taking a person's needs seriously. These experiences can have long-term emotional effects on people, and we need to look out for that. According to Bloomberg, after the lawsuit was filed, Target agreed to a legal settlement and committed to strengthening their ADA compliance practices. This included reviewing staff training, improving accessibility in checkout areas, and making sure employees understood how to support customers with visual impairments. While the settlement addressed the immediate issue, the case also brought national attention to how often people with disabilities face barriers that could easily be avoided. One thing that stood out about this case to me is how significant the emotional impact can be. Being denied help, especially in a moment where you rely on others to navigate a system, can lead to anxiety, embarrassment, or even a sense of helplessness. Even though this was a retail setting, the emotional experience ties directly into behavioral health. People with disabilities experience discrimination at higher rates, which can affect their self-esteem, trust in others, and their overall well-being. This case pushed conversations about disability rights, and it helped raise awareness that accessibility is not optional. It is a legal requirement and a basic human need. Incidents like this help encourage other organizations to take training seriously, so situations like this do not continue to happen. When someone is ignored or denied support because of their disability, it sends the message that their needs are not valid. Over time, this can increase anxiety and create fear of asking for help. Many people with disabilities experience emotional distress or even humiliation when communication fails or when staff interactions make them feel like an inconvenience. In behavioral health settings, these feelings can affect how comfortable a client feels opening up with us. People with disabilities may worry that a provider will also dismiss their experiences or fail to understand their perspective. According to Schiavo, cultural humility is essential in working with any marginalized group, including disability communities. Providers must be willing to listen, adapt their communication, and avoid assumptions about what a client can or cannot do. Clients with disabilities benefit from environments that honor their autonomy and include them in decision-making. Small steps like asking how the client prefers to communicate or making sure materials are accessible can make a huge difference for them. When clients feel heard and respected, It supports their emotional well-being, and it builds trust in the therapeutic relationship. Both of these incidents that we talked about show how important training is for behavioral health workers. The George Floyd case brought national attention to racial trauma, bias, and systematic discrimination. Behavioral health providers need to understand how these experiences shape clients' mental health and sense of safety. Clients may come in with grief, anger, or mistrust, so therefore providers must be trained to respond with cultural humility and emotional sensitivity. The Target case shows the other side of the picture, which is the disability discrimination that often happens because staff are not trained well enough to understand the ADA, accessibility needs, or respectful communication for that matter. Behavioral health workers need to be compliant in their training so they know how to adapt services, use accessible materials, and honor each other's autonomy. Reflective supervision is also very important. It gives workers space to notice their own biases, explore their reactions, and kind of learn how to improve their interactions. Research emphasizes that reflection helps strengthen ethical decision-making and cultural awareness over time. Overall, both of these incidents show that training must go beyond basic knowledge, and workers need ongoing opportunities to learn, practice empathy, and develop a deep understanding of how discrimination affects clients' mental health and emotional well-being. Preventing discrimination starts with cultural humility. That means being open to learning from each client's lived experience and avoiding assumptions about what their needs might be. When providers stay curious and willing to adjust their approach, they create a safer and more supportive environment for everyone. Accessibility is equally important. Services should be easy for all clients to use, including those with disabilities. This might mean offering materials in multiple formats, using assistive technology, or making sure the physical space is comfortable and safe for clients with mobility or sensory needs. Communication is another major factor. Using inclusive language, asking respectful questions, and being mindful of tone helps clients feel seen and valued. Supervision is helpful when providers feel unsure about how to navigate cultural or disability-related concerns. Finally, policy advocacy matters. Behavioral health professionals can support changes that reduce discrimination at an organization level, not just in individual interactions. By promoting equity in policies, training, and procedures, providers can help create systems where all clients receive respectful and appropriate care. These are the references that I used to gather my research, and thank you for watching my presentation. I hope you gained some knowledge and will use this in the future.